What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. This video is going to be a little bit different than our typical videos on this channel. In this one, I want to talk about the sound control that we do at Tidal Gardens. The audio aspect of this coral farm has kind of become a defining feature of Tidal Gardens. When people come and visit here, it is noticeably quieter than most other facilities. And oftentimes people ask, like, how did you do that? The answer is a monumental amount of effort. So I kind of wanted to go over some of those topics and why such a sound controlled environment is really helpful in a coral farm setting. Let's start over here first. Right now, I'm standing in front of one of our 500-gallon tanks. This system is made up of 500-gallon tanks plus the sump and filters. So you can see the microphone right here on my shirt, and there is basically no sound coming off of this tank. It's kind of surreal looking because you know that the water is moving. You know that there are pumps running, but there's this complete disconnect sound-wise. And I guess that is the first of our sound control methods that we're trying to do. We're trying to eliminate the source of the sound. You can do a lot with sound panels and stuff like that, and room treatments to bring down the boominess of sound. You can also do stuff in the walls to kind of prevent sound from going from room to room. That doesn't do anything when the source of the sound is still making noise in that room. This particular tank kind of employs a number of different things that we're trying to do to control sound. The first thing is we've chosen really quiet pumps. Most DC pumps these days are fairly quiet, but we needed to find pumps that are both quiet and industrial. So unfortunately, that means that we're getting Abiz pumps. So on this particular tank, there is an Abiz AFC 150. That's the big power head. We also have a closed loop that consists of a single A200 pump. Ideally, that should have been an A400 pump just for flow reasons, but for sound reasons acoustically, both of those are dead silent. The other big thing that we've done is this overflow is completely silent, and that's because we use Maggie mufflers. You can DIY something similar to a Maggie muffler, but for, I don't know, $20, $30, the Maggie muffler is an all-in-one. Just drop it right on there. This fits 1.5 inch plumbing. It's perfect. And really all that does is it eliminates that sucking sound that you might hear from an overflow. Moving to this angle, you can see the two Maggie mufflers that I've got going on. One of them is set to the height that I want the water level in the overflow box to be. That kind of cuts down on the amount of splashing that you get from the weir. The secondary is the emergency. Technically, nothing is really going through this guy at all. There is a third drain that's in this overflow box that you can't see, and that is backed off by a gate valve. And that's how we're actually adjusting the height of the water in here. This truncates that height. But what you really want to accomplish there is to have that entire main drain line completely saturated. And when you do that, there's no air sound. So again, microphone's very close. You cannot hear this overflow. This is a 500-gallon tank moving all kinds of water, but acoustically neutral. The next thing I'll point out is what's up above here, down the spine of this whole building. We use a number of these giant sound panels. These guys are actually called bass traps because they employ a thicker material. What you're trying to accomplish there is knock down some of like the longer wavelength. Now, there isn't a ton of lower frequency, long wavelength sound that's coming in here. Think of heavy bass, that sort of thing. These sound panels kind of cover that lower range better. Bass traps is a little bit of a misnomer. They cover all the frequencies, but their thickness also is effective for bass. The other thing that you might notice is that they are off the ceiling slightly. And what that accomplishes, you can get into some of like the acoustic math that goes into that. It is also an effective technique to get more sound dampening by allowing the wavelengths of sound to go through the material, bounce off of the ceiling, and get absorbed coming back through. I'm not going to get into the math about that, but by spacing it off of the ceiling, you're effectively doubling the sound absorption of these panels. Even though it is a 6-inch thick panel, it's performing more similar to a 12-inch thick panel, if that makes sense. And we have it going all the way down this building. Lots and lots and lots of sound absorption. And you kind of need that if you wanted to control the reflection of the sound in the space, because this is a very boxy, hard surfaces, and you're going to get a lot of that boomy resonance otherwise. This way, whatever goes and hits a panel kind of just gets stuck there, and it doesn't reflect off back into the room. The next thing, guys, that I want to point out are the little things. So right here, you can see that this little sump is dampened by a layer of foam and Dynamat on both the top and the bottom of the foam. Now, you might think that is super duper overkill for something like this, but once you start controlling the sound in a space like this, what you tend to have happen is a lot of the small nuisance sounds become bigger and bigger and bigger sounds. This little guy here, just because of like the return pump and the protein skimmer, it made this entire thing a resonance chamber. By isolating the vibration that's just coming from the mechanicals of this tiny little sump, it removed all of that. And believe it when I say something as small as this in a sound controlled environment like the rest of this building, you can hear this thing drone throughout the entire building. All right, guys, now we're standing in the middle section of the building, and this is by far the loudest area. And the reason why it is so loud is because we've decided at a very early stage to centralize all of our filtration. So here we have all of our intake Rubbermaids. This is where we just bring stuff in for observation. It goes through maybe like a week or two in there. We have 3 gigantic sumps. They are 500 gallons apiece. In and amongst all that, you have these large MRC protein skimmers. Another one behind me has the filter roller system. There are some splashy filter socks going on there, all kinds of filtration, calcium reactors and whatnot. So this area tends to get by far the loudest. If we were crazy about sound, we really could have isolated all of this in some back room someplace or made partitions. But the reason why we didn't is at the end of the day, this place really does have to function as a coral farm. And it is far better to have this area open and accessible for doing maintenance. Not great for acoustics, but we've done, again, all of those different steps to try to control sound. We are using the quietest pumps we can. We try to minimize the splashing that goes on in the sumps. And wherever there is an overflow, like this overflow box here, for example, again, we're using those Maggie mufflers. We're using gate valves to control the flow. So everything is really dialed in as much as possible. There's only so much you can do about the air intake of a protein skimmer. It is sucking in air, it's chopping it up, that's going to make a sound. But overall, considering how much activity is happening here, this is still a remarkably quiet place. If you've been peeking over my shoulder just a little bit, you might have seen some of the other sound control that we've got going on the walls. This stuff, if you look carefully, is everywhere throughout this building. This is what I would describe as architectural sound control paneling from a local company in Ohio called Audimute. They do some serious business installations. They did like Google headquarters, they did Amazon, and just about every drummer that you can think of, because the owner of this company is a drummer and he is tied into all your favorite artists' drummer. Believe that. Anyway, this stuff is actually studio quality sound paneling, and I've decided to put it just about everywhere in a coral farm, but the performance is out of this world. It does 2 things. The irregular shape of it breaks up reflection and is a sound absorbing material on its own. This stuff is actually made of recycled paper. And believe it or not, this does way better than those giant bass traps that I showed you earlier on the ceiling. Wherever we can, we've installed this sort of stuff on the wall. It is a really cool project to install. So the way that it's done is that these things come in, I think, 24-inch strips. They come in long strips. So you prep the wall first by putting down double-sided tape every so often. And then between the double-sided tape, you put construction adhesive, and the tape is just to hold it in place long enough for the construction adhesive to do its job. And so you just kind of go like row by row, and you really can't see where one row stops and the next row begins. It's like this seamless geometric scape that you get on your walls. If you put your ear up to this wall, it is a bonkers feeling. It feels like half your head loses pressure. Like you're in the cabin of an airplane, but it's only like half your head. So it's almost disorienting, like you almost want to like fall into the wall. Yeah, it feels like a pressure drop. So anyway, very cool material. You will see it all over. When I say I've snuck it in everywhere, even on these tiny areas between floors and stuff. Every little bit helps. One thing that I'd like to play with in the future is finding more light fixtures like these ATI Stratons that don't have fans. We have a few different ones. So these Straton fixtures don't have fans. Orphic Amazonas over our Peninsula show tank, they don't have fans. We have some GNC lights from Italy and some Philips Coral Care, which I guess is the Netherlands. Generally speaking, fans are fairly quiet on most of our light fixtures, but when you have hundreds of light fixtures all with their little independent fans, that can kind of make this low droning hum. And also over time, those fans can get kind of clogged up with dust and debris, and they start making like a louder and louder and louder noise over time. Going towards lighting that just doesn't have fans at all and relies more on heat sinks, that could be a future project to further lower our noise floor. Okay, guys, you get to see a little bit of behind the scenes stuff. I don't typically show a lot of the upstairs of this building, only because this really isn't part of like the Reef Aquarium experience. But since we are kind of going off topic with sound control anyway, now's a good time to show it off. One of the big perks to having all of the sound control, again, you can see the Audimute sound paneling on the walls here. You can see some of like the plastic plant ceiling, which doesn't do a whole lot acoustically, but you know, it's part of the vibe, I guess. One of the big benefits is this is a very cool, entertaining space. But one of the things that I always hated about large gatherings is just how insanely loud a place can be. With that much chatter, it's almost like draining on my energy just to stay there, stay in that room. This particular big open area is not acoustically perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It still has that boominess because of the hard floor and basically the hard ceiling. It doesn't look like it's hard because of the plants, but it's acoustically transparent. The walls, however, we're doing so much with the walls that even in this big, open, boxy space, the sound is more or less controlled. When we had our open house event, there might have been like 100 people up here. That is a lot of sound and conversation going on. And even though it is objectively loud, the sound is clean. So it's not exhausting. And you can have a conversation with somebody in front of you and not have to raise your voice that much. We don't entertain a lot, but when we do, it is a nice perk. Looking in this other direction, we've got our conference table, we've got the kitchen break area, and we've got kind of like the seating area with the TV. This brings up the other perk of having this much sound control. I was sitting on the couch and I was able to hear a pump that is easily 100 feet away downstairs making a weird sound. And that pump was going crazy. It was actively running and some way, somehow was getting so hot that the plastic outer shell was bubbling. That's not good. That's really not good. But it made a very specific, like, acoustic whine noise that just didn't sound right. Popped up off the couch, went downstairs, immediately unplugged that pump. In a facility of this size and this complexity, there's always going to be devices that are in some way, shape, or form melting down, literally. We try our best to use higher quality industrial gear where that tends to happen much less or never. There is still a lot of consumer grade devices here. Occasionally those things just melt. Being able to have another sense, able to detect that from so far away is a big deal. You know what this place sounds like, and you can immediately pick up, oh, that doesn't sound quite right. What the heck is that? And rush down and find whatever it is that's going wrong. It is an unbelievably powerful and important tool in the day-to-day operations of a commercial facility like this. I think it's only fitting that we end this video up here in the studio. You can see the podcast set behind me. This room is freakishly quiet. It is like alien abduction, weirdly quiet in here. Much of that is due to a different sort of Audimute sound panel on the wall. This kind of has like a rough textured rockscape to it. By the way, the colors of all this, Audimute is an official Sherwin-Williams paint store. That is how much they're using. You can pick any color that you want that's in the Sherwin-Williams catalog, and whenever Sherwin-Williams updates, the machines at Audimute automatically get updated. Very cool. Anyway, the wall paneling is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Again, it is the similar type of install where you're putting in double-sided tape and construction adhesive. It's a little bit trickier with this material only because it doesn't line up squares quite as easily. I still do like the look of that rough stone. The other thing that's doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting is the cloud ceiling. This cloud ceiling I've had up now for at least a couple of years. And the concern is, well, nobody's really done a cloud ceiling of this size. I don't know if it's going to get extraordinarily dirty up there. Turns out it is as clean looking as it was on day one, which is frankly miraculous. However, the LEDs being on for so many hours, they're starting to get like finicky, losing connection every now and again, slightly discoloring, so pure white is difficult for some of the strips. And I say some of the strips because there's literally 16 zones of LED lighting in the cloud ceiling. But again, acoustically, this cloud ceiling is so effective at sucking up sound. It's great for when we're recording podcasts, because this is a gigantic room, 1,500 square feet, something like that. Gigantic space, no reflection, super well-controlled acoustics. When we had our open house event, we had a couple of guest speakers, and we were able to seat about, I don't know, between 70 to 80 people in this room, and you could hear a pin drop. Still, with that many people, and the speaker didn't require any amplification or anything like that, didn't require a mic. It was just, nope, their voice carried perfectly. That's a very cool experience. And I did tell both of the speakers, like, listen, you've never given a talk in a place like this before. I promise you. All right, guys, that does it from here. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for indulging this non sequitur video talking about sound control. It is easily the defining thing of the Tidal Gardens Coral Farm that separates it from just about every other facility. And I have to say, it was a really fun side project to do in my free time. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, happy reefing.